So, skepticism, the philosophical idea of doubting everything, asking questions. Woo, that sounds like very philosophical stuff to probably everyone. You see, skepticism is quite a common thing. You should be skeptical, at least in philosophical contexts, where you're talking about philosophy. And you should always be asking questions. And so, if you didn't know and you didn't get it by now, skepticism is basically questioning everything. From the most common things to literal common sense and even the possibility of knowledge. And that will come very important later on. And so when we're talking about skepticism, let's talk about its end result. What is the conclusion, the logical conclusion of skepticism? Well, the logical conclusion of skepticism is the impossibility of knowledge. That's why questioning even the possibility of knowledge as being part of skepticism is so important, because that is the conclusion. If we ask, well, can't we have empirical data from our senses and knowledge through that? But I mean, everyone probably admits that our senses can be false. We can perceive things wrong. There's a lot of optical illusions and such which prove this. There's the possibility of hallucinations, and there is all kinds of philosophical problems which make it that we cannot trust our empirical senses when we are true skeptics. We must say, this is impossible, right? It's impossible to trust our senses. And so it's impossible to gain knowledge from empirical data when you're a real skeptic. And the real skeptic also says, well, logic, how can we even trust logic? We must question logic itself, right? Because we're real skeptics. And as we question logic, we ask, well, how can we know that logic is real and it's true? I mean, surely it must be based on a concrete foundation. But it isn't. It's based on the three laws of logic, commonly known as the law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and law of exclude the middle, which are all simple axioms which you cannot prove, at least with current knowledge. And so, they rely on circular logic. And so when you're a true skeptic and you take skepticism to its logical conclusion, you're like, well, we can't trust logic, because how do we know that the logic that we use and the systems of logic are correct? And we can't, right? Well, that's what the skeptic says. And then we cannot trust even empirical data because our eyes can be fooled, our senses and perceptions can be fooled. I mean, all that we see is just the makeup of our mind, really. I mean, our eyes pick up photons and then our mind creates the image that we see. We don't even see the real world. We simply see what our mind creates. I mean, that could be so easily fooled. And so when you're real skeptical, you're like, wow, we have nothing. We have no possibility of knowledge. And of course that leads to there being no morality. Because even if there was a right and a wrong, we couldn't know of it. That means that there is no meaning, because even if there were a meaning, we couldn't know of it. And so when you take skepticism to its logical conclusion, we have absolutely nothing. We do not even have a knowledge itself. And so you might be saying, well, why should we take skepticism to such an extreme degree where we question absolutely everything and we come to this position where we have no real knowledge at all? And well, the reason is simple, because that's what real skepticism is. Real skepticism in a philosophical context is exactly that, questioning everything. And that's what it leads to. Now, of course, if you wanna admit that you're a lukewarm skeptic who's only skeptical when it suits your ideas and your beliefs, then, well, you can admit that. But when you're a real skeptic, you will question everything, including your own beliefs, including the possibility of knowledge. And so when we have this conclusion of, wow, we literally cannot have knowledge. I mean, what's the solution? I mean, that's it, right? How does this even relate to God? I mean, surely if we cannot have knowledge, we cannot have knowledge of God. But you're wrong. You see, when we take skepticism to its logical conclusion, and we're left with literal nothingness, there is still hope. You see, the way we can have knowledge is if we have an omni-God. Because, well, only an all-powerful and an all-knowing God can solve the problem of skepticism. It is the only way that you can have some concrete foundation of knowledge and which can confirm to us that, hey, your empirical data can be trusted. You can trust what you see. And only this being can confirm that, hey, there is logic which you can use. And your laws of logic, you know what, you can use them. That is somewhat truthful. It is possible for you to do these logical statements. We need such a being to confirm that we can trust the sources of our information, because otherwise knowledge is impossible. And so, when we think about it, we have these two possibilities, which is, well, we have literally nothing, or we have something through God. And well, I think it's very obvious to most people that we have something. I mean, and if the argument is that, well, without an omni-God, there is nothing. Second premise, there is something. Conclusion, therefore God. It's very simple. You see, when we are skeptics, we must admit that there is absolutely nothing without God. But there clearly is something, and therefore God. God is the only way in which we can have any sort of confirmation that our senses and empirical data is correct. God is the only way we can trust that our knowledge and rationality is in any way correct. And it's not just foolishness. I mean, we require an omni-God, because, well, any God that would not be an omni-God wouldn't solve this problem, because they would have the exact same problem of skepticism. And, well, only an omni-God, which is all-knowing and all-powerful, can solve this. It is the only possibility. And, well, once again, it solves the problem. And, well, everyone in the world acts like this problem is solved. Everyone in the world knows that there is something instead of nothing, because God has written the confirmation in our hearts. It says in the Bible that God has written the moral code in our hearts. And you know what He has? He has written so much in our hearts. He has written the confirmation that we can trust our empirical data, and that's why everyone believes that when they see something, it actually is real. God has confirmed it. That we can trust what we see, and we can trust what we hear, and that we can use rationality, and we do have things like logic. Only with God can we even have a foundation for logic. And everyone uses logic. Everyone assumes it to be correct, because we have confirmation from God. And so when you're a real skeptic and you take skepticism to its logical conclusion, which you should if you actually are a real skeptic, you will realize that there should be nothing. There should be absolutely nothing. No possible knowledge. Yet there is. And that is the proof for God. Because only with a God can we have some possible knowledge, which we have. And so it is foolishness to say that there is no God. And all of these people saying, oh, skepticism, I'm so skeptical, there is no God, ha ha ha. Atheists. Atheists always claim to be skeptics, but they don't even understand what it is. But hey, I have now explained to you how skepticism leads to God. How in skepticism the logical conclusion is the impossibility of knowledge. Yet we have knowledge which proves that the only possible solution, which is an omni-God, has to exist. Thanks for watching, and Have a great day.